Hello again. How are you doing? Welcome to this channel. Thank you for um logging on to this video. By the way, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe so that more people can get a benefit from this, and we can be a blessing to other people. So today we'll ask a question and answer it, or at least attempt to answer it. And the question is, was your childhood traumatic? When I posted that video on adult symptoms of a traumatic childhood, I had a couple of people ask me, how do I even know if my childhood was traumatic? What are the things that I need to look back on as to have happened for me to feel okay? It was sort of complicated. So this video is for people like me who had some kind of complicated childhood, but we made it and we're at a better place, and we thank God for grace. And also for mothers, or maybe I say parents, who are wondering, how do I do it so I don't pass on the trauma of my childhood down to my children? Now, there's something called adverse childhood experience scoring. It's like a standardized test, so to say, as best I can, if I can use that word. But as best as it is, because you will still come, when I'm done discussing that as adverse childhood experience scoring, I will still discuss some things, peculiarities of the African setting that was not captured in this, but is also important as a trauma imprint in childhood. Now, as a disclaimer, for what is worth, I strongly believe that every parent loves their child, even if they end up traumatizing that child. I know it sounds counterintuitive. Truth is, many times trauma is passed down from generations to generations. So regardless of whatever you feel your parents may have failed at after watching this video, please know they loved you. I think that was the best of what they could offer. You can't offer people what you don't have. The bit of the love they had was what they offered, considering what life has probably dealt themselves. Then again, parents who would traumatize their children or put them in harm's way, many times are even unaware of the dynamics that is running their life. So I would say they have their own trauma that is undealt with, and there's no other ways around it. They will just pass it down. So the essence of this is not to witch hunt parents or to point fingers at those who are doing well or are not doing well. We're all works in progress. I'm also every day trying to be intentional about how I parent. The essence of this video is at least once we come to be aware of what went wrong or what was broken, we can be intentional about healing it so that we don't pass the trauma down another generation. So this is not to diss parents, this is not to point fingers, this is not to guilt trip anybody. It's just an eye opener to the fact that a lot probably happened in childhood than we give credit for. So when we then have adult symptoms of some mental disorders like addictions, depression, anxiety, and the likes, is oftentimes a telltale to the fact that some things were broken in the psyche at a very young age, and now they are manifesting in the adult body. So now, without further ado, let's go to the list. I would be going through the list on my system, so bear with me if I'm looking at the camera and I'm looking away. The first question you would ask, these questions should be answered before your 18th birthday. If it happens as a 25-year-old adult, that is not a childhood experience. But if it happens before 18th birthday, it counts as a adverse childhood experience. So the first question is, did a parent or adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? That's number one. If for the average African person, that is, everybody will get to tick that box. The few people who don't get to tick such box, I would love to know your parents and ask them what they did. Either they were really that settled themselves, or they were grossly absent for them not to have needed to check that box on your behalf. Then the second one is, did a parent or other adults in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, it doesn't have to be the parent. It could be some other adults in the house. So if parents fail, other adults can get to abuse their own children. Or if parents are absent or abandon their children, other adults can get to abuse their own children. So did this happen again? This was a routine, and is still a routine in many homes. That will also include those who had cuts and they rubbed pepper. That was a norm in my environment where I grew up, with the hope that the child will get to learn. That was trauma. If any parent gets to watch this, please don't do that to your children. There are other ways you can raise a child without scarring their mind, without scarring their body, without scarring their psyche. The third one is, did an adult, or at least someone who is 5 years older than you, touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? I'll pause a while for that to sink. It's unfortunate, but the statistics says that about one in 3 girls, 1 in 4 boys are sexually abused in childhood. But in my own opinion, in Nigeria, I think it may be more than that. It's just the stigma associated with issues like this. Nobody wants to talk about it. You don't want to put the patients, the relative, the family to shame. So you would rather bottle it up. Then you have adults dealing with this. Another spectrum I've also observed is men who are victims of this don't even see that as an abuse. They just saw it as they were catching cruise as a child. So to the young man or to the young adult who is listening to this and feels whatever happened in childhood when I was 4 wasn't an abuse, I was just having some escapades with the nanny or the maid, I tell you that was an abuse. You probably have symptoms of promiscuity now, infidelity and the likes, because at a very early age that portal was opened. And again, something has to be grossly missing in the parent-child relationship for another person, another adult, to be able to perpetuate that without it being brought to the awareness of the parent. So it's a box that is worth being very aware of. Then the fourth one is, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? This is families where everybody is OYO on your own. It's more like to each one its own. You hold your side, I hold my side. Father and mother don't relate. The children are at loggerheads. Everybody's just vying for independence. It doesn't mean that people are settled early in life. It doesn't mean that their children are independent and responsible. Everybody just learned a coping mechanism of stay on your own. That's the only way we can stay together as family. That's many times a trauma marker. Then the fifth one is, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the hospital if you needed? Simple way to break that down would be parents of alcoholic parents. Another way to break that down would also be people who really struggled with significant poverty in childhood. That's also a trauma marker. Then the sixth one is, were your parents ever separated or divorced? In that same box would be children who were born out of wedlock, so was raised by a lone figure, maybe raised by the grandma alone, raised by the father alone, raised by the mother alone. Children are meant to be raised by 2 loving adults, because those 2 people are the 2 individuals that produce the child, and the child imbibes his or her sense of worth from the love he or she receives. It receives from those 2 adults. So when it is halfway, that whoever is the nurturing adult has to do double the work to be able to fill that gap. And I tell you, it's not an easy one. In this age and time we live in, when you consider the responsibilities of work, finances, and God help the individual if he or she doesn't have some other children to take care of. So the child feels like I'm just half a human being. I hope that makes sense anyway. But bottom line is it messes up with their sense of worth, their sense of identity. The other human that formed me, if I can use that word, is not in my life. So they don't get to see that other picture, that other half of them. So at the core of the issue that such individuals have many times is a lack of sense of worth, and impaired sense of identity. So it manifests in various spectrums, from anger issues to aggressiveness to alcoholism to promiscuity to depression to you just name it. One form of mental health issue or the other. And sometimes they now become overachievers in the need to fill that void of, okay, if I wasn't worth something, if my father or my mother loved me enough, he or she would have stayed. But if I wasn't worth something that much, which was the reason they didn't stay, in the child's innocent mind, this child adult then decides to achieve success at all costs. So it's now like, oh, look at me now. You didn't love me then. Now I have something. I am valued for what I have or what I can do or what I can produce. And for some people, it is for their looks, especially ladies. It's for their physique. Oh, so look at me now. You understand what I'm talking about? Okay, so the seventh one was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at you? Or sometimes often or very often kicked, beaten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or a knife? That would also be parents who use stunning stick to beat their children. Okay, so the seventh one will be, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at you? Or sometimes often or very often kicked, beaten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or a knife? That would be those who were beaten with turning sticks. That would be those who were beaten with mop rods. That would be those who were beaten with brooms. And you just fill in the gaps. You know, the things we were beaten with as kids. And some things we still use as instruments of disciplines now. So that's also something worth taking note of. Then the eighth one is, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs? That could be a sibling, that could be an uncle, that could be just anybody who lived within your family of residence who used drugs or abused alcohol. This often is a pointer to the fact that there are some broken family dynamics, be it an uncle who used drugs. If the family dynamics was intact, such an uncle will not be tolerated or welcome in such a family, so that they don't pass some abnormal behaviors down to the children. And if it was a sibling who had to use drugs or was addicted or abused, or as any spectrum it could be, it goes to show that such a sibling needed to cope with the challenges of life, with some mental health or emotional burdens that they were not equipped to cope with early on in life. So again, it's a pointer to the fact that family dynamics is broken, and many times it comes with associated trauma. Then the ninth one is, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Perhaps the person died from suicide or did not. It's not it, but whatever it is that will lead someone to suicide or be the onset of a mental health issue, again, it goes back to what happened in that house. So family dynamics is broken. By now, those who have been watching this channel for a while will know that most mental health issues will stem from childhood. People don't just become broken. Their mind doesn't get broken in adulthood. Not very often. Many times there has been little breaks here and there from childhood, then there's a major crisis. Even the stress of being adults, just the stress of adulting is enough to set things off completely. So when you have someone with mental health issues, suicidal ideation, or any of those spectrums of mental health disorders, something was broken in childhood, is oftentimes an adult symptom of childhood trauma. Then the 10th one is, did the household member go to prison? Again, what offense will someone commit to lead to prison terms? Going to prison. How did they get to be so hardened to be able to commit such an offense? You name theft, you name rape, you name money laundering, you name whatever it is. Something is broken in their sense of worth, in their sense of identity, in how they find pleasure in life, and just the likes of things like that that will lead them into the prison. But many times such things are broken in childhood. Now there are two I will add, which is not on the ACE score. I think this is especially for Africans. One is female genital mutilation. I think we're about those who still practice it. There are still some places in Asia that still do that anyway. But that in itself is trauma, because in Africa, some people still get circumcised up till 10. Some teenagers still get circumcised. I don't know the trauma that tops that. Well, to each one his own. There could be something that tops that, but I know that is a very, very traumatic experience. Whether it happens as a baby or it happens as a grown adult who culture demands she must do it before she gets married, that is traumatic. Many times what it does is it messes up such a person's sexuality. So they are frigid, they don't respond even when they eventually get married. Libido is in the negative zone. They are completely frozen, if I can use that word, almost like asexual human beings, because I get the privilege of counseling people like that sometimes. So sex for them is just to give birth to children, not a means of connection in a loving marriage. Then the second one is how do I put it? Children who are sent to hawk things. Now, I'm not saying children should not learn skills or learn their parents' trade, if I can use that word. But it is those for whom the family's finances is so bad that they have to go and hawk things during school hours, which is why many governments are against such. They put up free education and the like. Or even need to hawk things late into the night. In which case, the children's security is in jeopardy. They are at risk of being raped. Many times, such children are victims of such. But because the parents are so preoccupied with survival, they don't even get on to mention it. So it's like one trauma is a template for another. Then they grow up into teenagehood and they're promiscuous, so to say, sleeping around because they need some money to sustain themselves. So that's a third trauma. Trauma, not to mention some other ones that could have been happening at home that again nobody really took note of. So now, to wrap this up, the question someone would then ask me is, what makes your ACE score significant? Is it a score of 1? Is it a score of 2? Is it a score of 5? And so on and so forth. Again, I will say to each one its own. Why it's difficult to say a particular score is significant is you don't know what it takes to break an individual. We are all wired differently, especially designed by the hand of God. That question is like saying, how many bones does an individual need to break to become incapacitated or to become disabled? You don't know, it may just be one bone, and for some people they need to have several fractures before they get to that point. But one broken bone is a limitation in life. So then you check this and you find that you have one. It's an area of interest to see, okay, from this trauma that I have identified as having happened in my childhood, what symptoms do I carry now? What can I change? How can I begin the process of healing? And how can I be intentional not to pass it down to another generation? Because like I said, just the same way some medical disorders are passed from one generation to another. They tell you hypertension is hereditary, diabetes is hereditary, some cancers are hereditary. Trauma, again, is also passed down. While I will not say it's hereditary, if we're not intentional about undoing some things that were done to us, in ignorance many times. I can say that 100 times. No parent decides to traumatize their children or put them in harm's way or become so unaware or negligent for children to fall victims of such. So while we may not be able to undo what was done to us, we should be intentional about not passing that down to the next generation. That's one. Two again is the essence of going to the past is so that it can inform the present. So when you look at yourself and you find some symptoms that just doesn't make sense, it's not that you're broken, it's not that you're abnormal, it's not that you have issues. It is that a lot happened that are running the narrative in your life now. So what can you do? How can you change things? And when you identify such, some ways you can begin that is journal on them, see if you can gain clarity on them. Find someone who is responsible, reliable, you can talk to. You can get some clarity on that. You will find a lot of YouTube videos on how people who had similar trauma to yours survived. You also find people who have also came out of that trauma stronger, healthier, so to say. Like they're now lights to people who have the same patterns with them because they've been able to find a way out, so they can come back and show people, oh, this is how it's done. I had the same narrative similar to yours. This is how I got out of it. Now I'm in a better place, and so on and so forth. So check it out, see which fits, and begin the journey to healing and recovery. So I wish you the very best. Until next time, please stay blessed. Bye.